Letter to the Activist. I often watch you with fascination. You're one of those who dedicate evenings, weekends, or even a lifetime to a cause greater than themselves. Of those who put up posters in the rain, who hand out flyers amid indifference, who debate until exhaustion, because they believe their ideas can change the world. There is something deeply noble about you. The activist gives up comfort, accepts wear and tear, disappointments, repeated defeats, learns to be in the minority, to be mocked, to start over. Despite everything, he carries on his shoulders a collective hope that requires an almost religious discipline. And then, there is that special joy that only committed groups know. The joy of being with like-minded people, speaking the same language, and instantly recognizing your own. To move forward together toward a common goal, with the exhilarating feeling of being part of something bigger than yourself. The activist is never completely alone. He finds a family in the struggle, warmth in shared conviction, and a solid foundation for his identity. But this is precisely where my question arises. At what point does commitment become a form of renunciation? At what point does defending an idea mean you can no longer question it? When does that happen? Does loyalty to a cause require you to silence your own nuances, hesitations, and contradictions? Because a group, even when driven by the best intentions, always ends up creating its own reflexes, slogans, dogmas, and necessary enemies. It offers immense strength, but it often demands something in return: alignment. A strange split then seems to appear between the cause and those who claim to serve it. Because one of the main goals of activism is to convince, to reduce the number of opponents, to gradually turn the enemy into a conversation partner, and maybe even into an ally. As the opponent grows, they become more caricatured, threatening, and omnipresent. The more necessary the fight seems, the more justified the anger feels, the more the activist reinforces his own reason for being. So I wonder, does this sometimes unconsciously push the activist to stop trying to convince and instead to point out, denounce, and swell the ranks of what ultimately allows him to feel alive? The enemy then stops being an obstacle to overcome and becomes an invisible pillar of the activist's identity. And maybe our era amplifies things a bit because every outrage becomes visible, every clash a spectacle, every enemy is immediately singled out, sometimes even against their will. So sometimes confrontation ends up taking the place of commitment, obligation, alignment. Not because it convinces, but because it brings people together, because it unites its own side by flattering them just as much as it strengthens the other side by hardening them. Maybe that's the most subtle trap, when a cause that wants to change the world unconsciously starts to need the world to remain imperfect in order to keep giving meaning to its fight. How many activists still carry a message? How many have one that truly belongs to them? How many continue to think for themselves once the songs are over, the meetings are finished, and the flags are folded away? Isn't activism for some really about a need to exist, to be surrounded, to feel valued? A selfish act in the end, but not without consequences. And what if the greatest sacrifice of the activist isn't really their time or energy, but rather a quiet part of their inner freedom? That fragile freedom to doubt, to add nuance, to think against your own side, to remain an individual even in the heart of the collective.
Maybe true commitment should actually start right there.
In the ability to serve a cause without ever completely surrendering your mind to it. The need to exist should not sacrifice existence itself. You, activist, who listened to my open letter, maybe you questioned yourself, maybe you don't relate to it, maybe it's because I wasn't talking about the right political side. That's good, I made another one for the opposite camp. I also made one for the extreme center, but since it's a bit edgy, I set it as unlisted. It's better to have it last. Take care.